Akshay, founder of Proto, a user-generated incentivized map of the world. Welcome on the Geospatial Index.
Thanks, Will. Big fan. This is exciting for me to be here. I've been watching this for a long time, so it's fun.
I appreciate that. It's nice to know that my podcast efforts are somehow making their way around the world a bit, even to India. So yeah, thanks.
It's amazing.
All right. So without further ado, what's the elevator pitch for Proto?
So Proto is building a decentralized, user-generated, incentivized map of the world. What that means is people contribute data about the real world, kind of like OSM, but they're incentivized to make those contributions. And we use that data to build a decentralized graph of the real world. A graph is basically a type of data structure which allows better communication between different kinds of nodes, which means that it's much more evolved for AI training, for retrieval augmented generation, for managing traffic, things like that.
Amazing. I also heard you use the term local code online on LinkedIn and in our initial conversations. Could you explain that a bit too?
So just from a higher level, local code is like it's an indexing system. It's a very personalized indexing system for users, which means that you know how you have, so in India, we have UPI IDs, which is basically a user's address where you can send them money. And I'm guessing what's popular in the US is Venmo. So like a Venmo ID. It's kind of like that, but for individual addresses and personalized places. So akshay.home.proto becomes my home address, and that's indexed to my home. But the value it creates is that because when I'm searching for stuff, I'm searching for my personal stuff, I kind of have the ability to find that faster. And when geocoding is being run on sort of applications, because the namespace includes the type of place it is, I'm able to fine tune my search for specific reasons.
Okay, so there's a lot of this sounds like the internet or the modern world reinterpreting addresses, which have a lot of ancient sort of concepts in them, and a lot of variability by country around the world. And I knew that from a previous episode with Ed Freifogel, who runs OpenCage, a geocoding system. So it's really interesting to have some more commentary on the concept of geocoding and addresses in a modern context.
You know, it's funny because there's a meme in India. It used to be a meme in India long back, which is a picture of a guy's Amazon order, and the Amazon order has his name and his address, and the address says XYZ city, XYZ neighborhood near this temple, and then the rest of the address is call me when you get to the temple, because you're not going to be able to find the actual place. And we have this kind of issues with like addressing here since a long time now. I mean, just finding an address in India, no one really communicates using them. And because the layouts and because the city plan is just haphazard, almost unplanned, it's organic growth, it's really hard to kind of pinpoint stuff with a high degree of accuracy.
Right. Yeah. Okay. It's really interesting. And I guess we can track this and many other efforts to make delivery more efficient in the future. Okay, then. So what's the niche that Proto dominates?
So we're focused on two things. We're focused on, firstly, we're a completely emerging market focused product. Most of our contributors, most of the community, they're based out of India or Indonesia, Nigeria. And I think that's because the problems that we're trying to solve are very large in emerging markets as opposed to sort of in the rest of the world. The other is that enterprises in those markets, I think over the past, in the post-COVID era, we kind of saw a lot of logistics, delivery, ride sharing, instant delivery, quick commerce kind of products show up in these markets, which work very well here, but their problems are very similar. They kind of face problems which are rooted in this geocoding, addressing, targeting delivery, targeting drivers, things like that, in that problem space. So enterprises in those particular markets which have those specific problems are the kind of niche that we kind of target. And the graph is kind of our solution for that niche and that particular market. We're not very sort of focused on, let's say, how this problem plays out in Europe or how this problem might play out in the US, because I think the approach might need to change. geographically.
Okay, so I think maybe it would be a good idea to talk about how the app sort of works. And I did download it last week and have a go registering some addresses or houses in the app. And one
Awesome.
thing that related particularly to your point about sort of solving where things are in a urban environment that has grown organically was that there's a requirement in the app to have 4 photos of the house or the building that you are registering the location of. And I guess I can appreciate how helpful it would be to a delivery driver or someone who, has to visit a large volume of addresses in a day to have all of those photos to really see ahead of time what they're looking for. Um, in the real
Yeah,
world.
the picture actually solves two problems. I'll give you an interesting anecdote here. The thing is, especially in India, we have a high literacy rate, but that literacy rate is kind of like wonky. The numbers are not accurately represented. What we do know is that most people can speak and communicate in multiple languages, but they might not be comfortable reading them, right? So if you have a picture of that particular place where you're making the delivery to, that's 90% of your problem solved, because you're not getting the
Okay,
phone call saying, where the hell is this place?
perfect. Right. Yes, I can. That's a really nice illustration of identifying customer needs. Yeah, I really like that. And not for just, responding to what people really need rather than forcing, a multi-year process, which would be good to cause literacy rates to increase. But in the meantime, you'd need to have a functioning delivery system. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Um, all right. So what is the skin in the game of the owner, managers, and staff of Proto?
So, I mean, we're a venture funded company where there's a small team, we're a team of 5 people. The team has equity and they have sort of all the incentives that typically venture funded companies do. But the skin in the game really is both for the community and the team, really. Because the community is incentivized to contribute, this decentralized contribution system with tokens and ways to sort of almost give people who are participating in this a stake in the actual eventual product or protocol makes it such that you're not just invested in making the contribution at the point where you're making the contribution, but you're invested in the process of keeping that contribution alive, right? Almost because places change and you got to update those. And you're invested in the long-term well-being of the entire community. And that sort of skin in the game is much more valuable, I feel, if you're trying to build something like this.
Well, yeah, because I joined the WhatsApp community that you've set up, and I saw it's very healthy. There's so many notifications I get. It seemed like there was about 500 users last time I checked.
It's 852 people in the community.
Wow. Okay.
Users are much more. We have a separate community with delivery drivers who kind of use the app, and that community is segmented based on the language that they're comfortable with. So we kind of keep that community separate. And I mean, yeah, obviously that's more of a like voice communication community versus this is like proper chat, like a Discord or
Okay.
a Telegram or whatever.
Yep. Okay. I guess I was going to come to how I saw some discussion up on the incentive front, about how there was a rule that you would be rewarded if you were in the top percent, some sort of percentile, like quartile, of contributors that particular day or something like that. And that was your way to try to cause people reward those who contributed at the highest volume, was it?
So I'll break this down a little bit. Rewards are consistent. Everyone gets rewarded no matter what it is. We like periodically run these competitions, mapathons, which are of two kinds. There is an IRL version, which is people gather in the city in a neighborhood and they walk around and they map that neighborhood together. And then there are remote ones where it's just that compete with each other during this time period, and then if you win, then you got kind of get an additional prize or something. And those competitions are like we kind of play around with how they are structured sometimes. Sometimes we have like them do different teams, sometimes they're thematic, whatever. So we ran this thing called the Gladiator series last month, which was 30 days. Each day you would be given a specific task, and the task would be kind of like, today you got to map bars, and today you got to map restaurants or whatever, and there'd be a limit on how many places you got to map, and you could be teams of 5, and your team has to be in the same city, and then based on sort of how you end up ranking, at the end you kind of get a prize, and there are daily prizes and monthly prizes and everything, and then eventually there is one grand series of prizes which are distributed to everyone. So that's the one that you saw the discussion about, which is they were all trying to figure out how. So I think there were two things. One, they were trying to figure out who was on the top, in the top 99th percentile of the game, and people at the bottom were obviously not happy that they were. So the thing that happened was that there was a group of people who came right towards the end, and they kind of just blitzed. Like they ran. I think they almost finished like 7 neighborhoods in this one city called Nagpur in India, and they just climbed to the top instantly. And that's obviously like it's part of the game.
That's really exciting. It makes me wish I could be over there and participate because, but there's one, it reminds me of OpenStreetMap and the mapathons that I ran in some places. And, it gets addictive just like mapping the territory and seeing, on the map what you've done. So it's really nice
I
to
used
know
to do
that
this when I
somewhere there's
was
this enthusiastic community.
I used to do this when I was in college, and it kind of gets a little bit competitive too, right? Because
Absolutely.
you feel like this is part of me. This is a piece of my work.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess also people would really love the fact that, through that they're facilitating everyone around them being able to navigate more easily. And
Yep.
yeah, there's a legacy, some satisfaction through legacy there. Okay, so I think related to this, another thing we discussed briefly was that in some way you are paying this community to map the world for you, and we had a small discussion about the cost to the organization per square kilometer of that. Are you comfortable to discuss that a little bit?
I can give you like an overview of how this thing works, right? Let's just think of this like, so you know the H3 system, right? The Uber's
Users,
H3 system.
listeners might not. If you could just briefly
All right,
discuss that
all
too.
right. So
I
Uber
make sure that
developed
all
this.
guests define any terms.
I'm sorry if I nerd pin for a little bit, please pull me back, and then we will
No
let
problem.
me explain. So Uber developed this system called the H3 indexing system. It's a grid of hexagons that are nested within each other, hierarchical, and they're laid over the earth. The hexagon is best because a hexagon centroid is equidistant from all the neighboring hexagon centroids. So you're kind of able to map stuff very accurately because of that. And it kind of, you can bin stuff together into hexagons. You can create like larger decision making systems based on it, all of that. We use the H3 for a bunch of stuff. One of the things we use it is that at the H8 level, which is the level at which each tile is roughly 5 square kilometers, we have divided the world into that sort of grid. Each tile is 5 square kilometers. Within each tile, based on how many building footprints exist, we assign that tile a maximum number of points. So when you're capturing data in a particular tile, you're kind of pulling from that pool of points. Once you capture a data point, each data point has an age. So a restaurant, for example, is a year. Within a year, it needs to be updated. Whether it has changed or not is
Wow.
irrelevant. It needs to be updated. An apartment building is like 2 years. So you kind of got to keep these things updated at that rate.
Amazing.
So every time things go out of date, the number of points in that tile get topped up. And you got to go back and get those points back. So that's the overall system. Now, the way the points work is that you earn points and you kind of climb up a ladder. Obviously, there's tiers and badges and everything. And based on how high you are in the hierarchy, you get perks associated with the points. So based on if you're, let's say, the top tier cartographer is the top tier on the app. If you're a cartographer, you're able to convert your points to Amazon gift cards or USDC or whatever you want. And that's based on the prevalent rate at that point.
That's fantastic. So similar to Uber, where there's surge pricing to incentivize drivers to serve particular areas, do you do anything like that? Like, are you able to, does the app, because I did use the app, but I didn't see any information currently about which hexagons, for example, I should focus on that are the most dense, yet the least mapped, so that I have the maximum chance of accumulating points for my time.
Yeah, this is something we haven't added to the app yet, but you can figure it out on the coverage map. Coverage.protomap.xyz. You can head over there. You can see which tiles have data, enough data, and which tiles don't. And you
Okay.
take a look, and it'll tell you sort of where you're most likely to sort of get a lot of value from.
Coverage map dot.
Coverage.protomap.xyz.
Okay. I can see it already. Okay. I might just briefly share my screen so that listeners can get an impression.
Yeah, we're updating this to make it global. Right now, it's India only.
Okay.
So you might want to zoom in. Let's just zoom in on Mumbai because that'll be easiest. Mumbai is on the western corner of India. Yeah, actually right where your cursor was earlier.
Here?
A little above that. You see that little notch up there? Yep, right there. You zoom in.
There we go. This podcast is about geography. So wow, this is really cool.
So darkest tiles, maximum data. Lighter tiles, no data. Empty, no data at all.
Wow. So if I click on a tile, do I get... Okay.
So earlier this used, if you could log in. We set up a system where you could log in and people could see their contributions with each tile. But we had a little bit of a hacker issue recently, and we had to kind of deprecate that version.
Oh wow. Okay. All right. Cool. So it says 50% coverage by Proto.
That means 50% of the top of the total number of points that need to be contributed in that tile have been claimed.
Okay. And this one says 150%.
So there are places where people over contribute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So
and that's fine. It doesn't really make a difference to the overall quality of the map because more pictures mean better triangulation, better positioning, better quality checks on the data and stuff like that.
Okay. So these tiles reflect the contributions. Is there any information there about the density of potential data or points to score, if you know what I mean?
No, we don't have that live.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Nice.
That's a good point. Yeah, we need to put that up as well. We can just add it in here.
Yeah. That would require a global analysis of building footprints. And I guess
we've only done this for like 3 parts of the world: India, Indonesia, and Nigeria.
Okay. Yeah. Right. So at least you as an organization have done that analysis. So cool. All right. Look forward to these kind of developments. Yeah. Okay. I'll come back to the agenda. I realize I am asking you a few questions beyond the agenda, so thanks for putting up with
that.
Fine.
It's fine.
It's real. If I can say, I think I recall you saying it might ultimately cost about $500 in some cases per square kilometer to get the world mapped.
$300 per square kilometer.
$300. Okay. So if it was just one person collecting all the points in that square kilometer, potentially then they could, I mean, I don't know what the rate of data production might be, but at least there is an income of some sort that people can genuinely get. But I guess is your point that because you said that there's a time element as well, or an updating requirement. Do they lose that financial reward if they don't go back and update it? Okay, so the first iteration, they're rewarded.
Yep. You make a contribution, you're rewarded. That's the first, like the absolute truth. The other piece is that you gotta each time you update it, there is like an additional number of points that you can make. So you get first shot at updating it if you were the original author.
Okay, and is each update worth the same reward or lesser reward?
So update values depend on how much of an update there is. If it's a completely new building, everything has changed, then that's much more. If it's not, if it's just, you're just checking if the place is still there or not, then it's worth very little.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. So there's a genuine incentive really to be the first to map the world in terms of what Proto knows. Okay. That's a really fascinating concept that there could be, that you could earn a livelihood, I guess, in terms of some
I wouldn't say you can earn a livelihood. Like I really
Okay.
want to dissuade people from thinking of this like as their, for lack of a better word, salary,
Yep.
right? Uh, like it's great if you can supplement your income with this. If you can do this as a hobby on the side and it's just getting you additional income. If you can take that income and invest it somewhere, maybe I don't know, make some additional money, let that money
Yep.
grow for you, like build wealth over time. Thinking about it is your salary might be not the best idea because at some point the once each tile gets full, like once each tile is completed, then the graph of how much value you can extract from it kind of starts to go down, and your home geography is not going to change.
Yep.
So if your city is fully mapped, you're kind of like running the clock out on yourself over time.
Got you. Okay. Yeah. I don't want to uh, belabor the point, but it does then. I've got in my mind, some enthusiast who's going to go across India or Nigeria or Indonesia and just, you know, uh, have a scooter and map, as much as they can, just
That has
riding around.
happened. That has
Right.
happened in Indonesia, by the way. There used to be there's a guy, Nashihun, his name is, and he has a scooter and he kind of drives around constantly, like just doing the stuff. And we built this partnership because that gave us the idea that we can do this much more often. We built this partnership with a local EV company here, where if you are a mapper above a certain level, if you've made a certain level of contributions, you can just rent out an EV for free for a few days. An electric two-wheeler for a few days, take it around and map as much as you want and bring it back and use it for your personal reasons or whatever you want.
Awesome. Great. Okay. It sounds like a real legitimate business you've got going. Okay. Who is your ideal customer for this product, and how do you all ensure that you're always working backwards from their needs?
Yeah, I think geocoding is used universally across the board for if you're building a product, you're using in operations like for logistics, if you're kind of doing it analytics or something like that. But I think for us, the niche that we're really interested in is transportation, logistics, and delivery, ride sharing and deliveries, that space. And I think there are two reasons. One, their need is much larger because the number of problems, the time to delivery, if you can optimize that for them by removing the friction at the point where the delivery is happening, then that means more deliveries and faster deliveries. And the same thing with ride sharing, right? If you can optimize time to pick up for them, then that means faster pickups and more drop-offs and stuff. So that particular space is where we're kind of most focused on right now. And over time, we can sort of expand to other stuff. And I think we've been working backwards from their needs in the sense that just how we structure the contribution system is based on what they would need. So I'll give you an example. If you've used the app, one of the things that you will see very commonly in the address field is we ask for a landmark always, right? And the landmark is really important because, at least in India, people refer to addresses by landmarks, not by streets. So I live on a street called Charles Campbell Road. No one in the entire Bangalore knows where Charles Campbell Road is, but they know that there's a hospital near my house, and I refer to it based on the hospital or the golf course near my house. So that's the kind of reference point that you need always. And if that reference point exists, and you can get that response in an API call for geocoding, then your auto driver or your car driver can make a better decision about where he needs to drop.
That's amazing because it's really funny. All of these episodes now involve references to other episodes. So there's been a bit of a theme of landmark-based navigation, actually, that started in, again, the episode with Ed Freifogel about OpenCage. I continued that in the discussion with Stephanie May in her experience at Apple Maps. And I also referenced my own little peer-reviewed publication about the need that academics had found for including landmarks in turn-by-turn directions, simply because landmarks are generally how humans worldwide navigate and share route instructions, between each other. If I was to verbally instruct you how to get somewhere, as you've just described. And what we sort of came to in our discussion, Stephanie and I, is that at least in the West, maybe where there's a more structured approach to addressing systems and urban planning, that we observed that it's strange how, despite all of this academic research, in the end, landmarks haven't really been included in turn-by-turn route direction systems like Apple Maps. But then I've got you saying how, because you've identified a customer need where that definitely does need to be available via the API. So it's really interesting to see this theme coming up again. And depending where you are in the world, it being a genuine customer need for success of a platform.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it's also interesting, right? Because even if you're in New York, like the most sort of gridded out city in the world, if you're at Times Square or if you're near the Bull, you're going to say I'm near the Bull and I'm near Times Square. You're never going to say I'm on Broadway and whatever the intersection of Times
Yes,
Square is, right?
absolutely. There are some massively well-known landmarks, absolutely, in on
Yeah,
the grid system of Manhattan. Yes. Yeah, and regular people definitely would use them, right?
yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting via the podcast to observe these patterns. So yeah,
yeah.
we'll see what future guests say. Okay. So moving on to the next question, then, how fast and sticky is product growth?
Yeah. We publicly launched the app mid to late February, somewhere around that time. Before that, we had the app. We were beta testing it in a couple of mapathons in Bangalore and a bunch of other cities. Since then, we when we started, it was like 100 contributions a day or 50 contributions a day or whatever. Now we do anywhere between 15 to 20K contributions a day.
Damn.
We're overall covered about 60 million data points so far. Uh, and I mean, it kind of 15 to 20K is the average. It kind of fluctuates. It's higher on weekends, obviously, because people go out and they contribute. The monsoon came in the middle, and that kind of plummets the contributions for a little while. But on average, that is how it's been going so far.
Wow, that sounds like an absolute fire hose of data. I guess the next obvious question is what kinds of spatial data is the platform incentivizing users to collect? We've, for example, talked about building locations and photos of them. Um, do you also have the community collect roads, rail, bus stops, those sorts of things?
No, anything that you can infer or interpret from a satellite image, we don't collect because I feel like that would be redundant. Uh,
Okay.
whatever you can. So I'll walk you through the flow, right? You take pictures. The pictures are the most important part. There's like in the guidebook, there is a document set which outlines what kind of pictures are ideal for what type of place that you're taking a picture of. So based on the category and tag, there is a very specific kind of picture that you need to take for each category and tag. So there's that. And what we do with the pictures is obviously OCR, right? So you're
Yep.
extracting text, extracting different kind of characteristics and features from that. Also gives us a sense of things like, is parking available there? Does this place have outdoor seating? Answers to questions like that. Then people have the option to sort of fill in addresses and names of places and metadata like contact details. Does the place have wheelchair access? Does it have free Wi-Fi or a public toilet and things like that? There is an option to sort of add a review and a rating, and that's mostly the biggest function of that is to just allow the user to personalize that particular contribution a little bit so that they can have fun with it. So they contribute and then they sort of write out a review if they're really interested in it. And there are particular users on the app who kind of are review heavy, and there are some users who are data heavy, who are image heavy. And because the process is chunked up, because anyone can start a contribution but anyone can come in and finish it, so it just lets people pick out their specific niche within that entire contribution set. And then there is this thing called deck, which is where you can verify contributions made by others. You can do this from the home screen directly as well, but you can just verify contributions that others are making. And that's just a way to sort of make sure that that particular contribution was valid and it's legitimate. It's not malicious activity.
Incredible. So it seems like overall the system is about origin and destination buildings, really?
Buildings, POIs, and then additional attribute information about places.
Okay. And so then your customers would be combining this data with other spatial data to achieve navigation?
Actually, you don't need to do that anymore. So let's just say you're trying to do roads, right? Most roads data is open source. This it's sort of the planetary computer gets all the roads out there for you. So what you're really and navigation is not rocket science as long as you have the data. So Dijkstra's algorithm has existed since God knows when, and you're kind of just running that. I think the one thing that we don't have right now, which we're working to improve so that it serves the customer better, is traffic data. So that we can sort of provide that as well, and they can make better decisions. The way we do that right now is that people have always on location on the app, so we're inferring traffic conditions based on their movement.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I did notice that when I had the app going. All right. So, wow, this is a multi-source approach to understanding the pulse of a given location via location data. So then do you maintain, I guess from OpenStreetMap and other open data sources as you described, do you maintain a navigation solution where
We haven't built that out yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see. Okay,
Yeah.
so you're
All the
looking, yeah.
solutions like navigation, geocoding, human insights on places, metadata and attribute information APIs for all of those are being built out right now.
Okay,
But like it'll take a little bit of time.
cool. Okay, so presently the drive is to use the community to get the intelligence on locations, I'll just say. And in the end, you'll be offering a comprehensive navigation solution. Okay, very interesting. All right. So what is the most densely mapped part of the world using Proto? Are you able to share your screen or show some data, compare it to other systems?
I mean, yeah, the coverage map is available, so everyone can take a look. I guess we
Okay.
just saw it, so
Yeah.
there's it's available, and you can sort of take a look. The most densely part. So when we started, our first focus was only on Mumbai and Bangalore. That's it, no other cities. So Bangalore is definitely the most densely mapped out part of the world for us. Highest quality,
Where's
and
Bangalore?
this is going to be hard to find. It's like inland in the middle, and if you don't know the country a little bit, it's hard for me to like lead you to it.
Okay, I'll just sort of somehow show India.
Yeah, but this kind of makes it look like we have coverage everywhere. It's just because like we're zoomed out. If you zoom in, we do have gaps and everything.
Yeah.
The second I think it's India is where most of the community is, and most Indian cities is where our contributions happen and all the data collection happens. So India is where like is the most densely mapped out part that we have right now. Any other part of the world where we have presence, it's anecdotal at best. Still, we're kind of
Yeah.
working on improving community there and presence there. So Indonesia is one. Oh, looks like someone from my team pushed a commit.
Okay.
But Indonesia is one. There is Nigeria, Kenya, Vietnam, Philippines. So a lot of Southeast Asia and India, but India is where most of the focus is.
Yeah, I'm waiting for it. Okay, Philippines.
Yeah.
There's
I
some
think
over
India
here.
is where like. Oh, we have three. Like there is a group of people actually. These are friends of mine. Who live in the islands.
Crazy.
Because I used to live there, and for a little while when I was younger, and yeah.
This is great. Look at that. Okay, all right, I could get lost in this map. All right, so inevitably it's in India to summarize that you have the best coverage presently. And did you say Bangalore?
Bangalore is the highest, and followed now by Kolkata, where the community has really kicked in and they've kind of just catapulted collections.
Cool. Okay. So how successful is geocoding with the data you have managed to collect, and how does local code relate to this problem?
So geocoding is a two-part problem, right? It's a search. Fundamentally, you're searching for stuff, and the more data you have, the better your search gets, and then you can optimize for search over time. Uh, we use pretty much the same geocoding process as, let's say, nominative mod Elasticsearch, which is the one that's built on OpenStreetMaps. The difference is that what local code does is, because the namespace includes the type of place within the description, the search term and the category go hand in hand, and you're able to fine tune for the thing that you're searching for. So let's just assume that you're making deliveries, right? 99% of the time you're making a delivery to a home, and if you have that filtered into the process, then the results that I give you will be much more accurate in your radius than the results that would be like, let's just say, all the places that are which match the name, match the search term.
Okay, cool. So basically, the structure of a local code helps you narrow down what's returned to the user.
Yeah.
All right, cool. And just to say that geocoding is about the idea of using some text information about an address and converting that to ultimately a pair of coordinates to navigate someone to that location. Cool. Okay. Anything else to say about that?
I think that's pretty much it. Like, it's fairly. I think the interesting part that we hope to unlock with local code over the next few months is people building more and more of their personalized local codes, and just let's just say will.home.proto becomes your home address, because I think what that transitions into over the next 5 to 10 years is an ability for you to not just store your addresses in that namespace, but all of your location history in that namespace. And if you're able to own that, when AI comes to take your job, that data is going to be a source of income for you. And it also sort of helps you handle all the GDPR complications and everything that surrounds location data, like privacy issues and everything, in a much more efficient manner. If there is something online that is dedicated to you and only you can access, and products can pair with it, and they can request access to it whenever they want, and on the edge they compute the sort of recommendations and ideal locations and stuff like that for you when you make the request, then that is a massive unlock. And that's something that like it'll take time for it to play out.
Fascinating. Yeah. I mean, I've lived in a few places around the world. And often when I apply for a job, or as part of the visa application process for a country, they might ask for the last 5 or 10 years worth of addresses. And I've actually got, this multi-page Google Docs file that has all the addresses going. I have had to do it going back a decade, and it can take a long time to figure out what all of those were. um, so yeah, it could be interesting to have a systematic record in a user location profile.
Yeah, this is already being worked on in the financial world, right? The interoperability of financial data, or your credentials and bank account information, investment information, things like that, and making that interoperable so that you can use it anywhere you want and you have control over it, is being worked on. I think we need to work on it in the location sort of space, so that we're able to offer that same level of flexibility and you're able to do the same things with that data.
Okay. So yeah, and I also appreciated how you were saying you had some sensitivity to GDPR and privacy concerns about location, but at the same time, if a user chose to expose their current address, for example, to other systems that might want to make recommendations to them, again, if the user chose to expose that, they could find that the recommendations that are provided through those systems could be useful. For example, if they were new to a location.
I feel like it's a like what we have today is a one-way relationship with the product. That the product has, if you use an Android phone, for example, your Android phone has like this just tons and tons of, if you try to export your Google Maps history, it's like a 7-8 GB file, right? And it has tons and tons of data points about you, where you've been, what you've liked, what you've done, everything. And that's just a one-way relationship. But there is a possibility for that to be a two-way relationship, where you're is making the decision about, okay, Airbnb just needs to know what kind of places I like to live at, and I'll just share that, and they'll get what they need, and they don't have a problem with it, and I don't have a problem with it. and I get to move on and I get the best services possible. Because ultimately that data will need to be shared. It's just that giving the power back to the person who owns that data, whose data it is, to make the decision about how they can share it.
Yep. Yeah, I have had my Google Maps location history turned on and off at certain periods over my life. I definitely used it to figure out precise addresses for where I had lived way back in the past a few times. Yeah, okay. All right. So what, if anything, are customers saying to you about their AI needs? Do you have any comments on the concept of a knowledge graph in this context?
Yeah, this is very interesting. I think I sent you a tweet from Sam Lesson, and he said, I'm just going to read it out. Excuse me. The tweet says the division between systems which can be fully digitized and those that cannot gets even more intense with AI. This puts even more pressure and creates more value at the efficient interface of the digital and physical world. And it's kind of like um, you're we're we're tending towards the zero latency map situation, right? Because I mean, we're at that point where satellites can vectorize maps on the fly. Satellite imagery can be vectorized on the fly. Sorry.
Yeah, and there was a huge development in the past year with Segment Anything from Meta.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
feel like that was an inflection point.
Yeah. And the next step in that is sort of maximizing your surface area of getting data, and then the ability to fill the gaps in. Because what products want now, what like let's just say the customers that we're working with, ride sharing and delivery customers, what they want now is not to what they've already established their operations, right? Their network of people delivering and picking up and so it's a machine that is working. What they want now is to create stickiness for the user, and that comes from being able to, if I call for a Uber, I want a match faster. I want a match which is ideal. Maybe depending on, like, if I'm going to the airport and it's like a faraway ride, I want a better car than if I'm going for like a 2 minute ride, which is like right here. And those kind of tiny things is what they're trying to optimize for. And all of those are like very, like they seem like small things, but they're massive unlocks in terms of customer experience for them. To be able to do that, they need two things, right? One, they need like a ton of data to be able to make those decisions actively. And that data needs to be in a way ready to be used for whatever AI microservice they want to build, whether that's for driver matching, rider matching, whatever that might be. And the graph for us is a very interesting solution to that problem, because inherently, like, it represents information a spatial information in a very semantic manner. So when you have a building and POIs within that building, and that building on a road, and that road intersecting with another road, and I assign each of these nodes a weight based on the geometric length or based on the traffic, then information that is moving is actually almost like a vehicle that is moving through that map, right? Almost simulating movement through the map when you're sort of performing graph reversal. And the ability then to unlock higher things becomes much better because this data is ready to be trained with AI. And what it also does is that if, let's just say, this particular building changes or this POI changes tomorrow, I don't need to retrain a whole model. That change is highly localized to that particular node and its relationships. And all I need to do is just track those. So if the world keeps changing and this graph keeps evolving, but you have this sort of the ability to continue working on the product that you're working on without having to sort of retrain data sets and work through sort of larger problems. This is also sort of generally the trend in which AI is heading, in that, like, retrieval augmented generation, RAG, which is now which is the process of asking an LLM a question and that LLM performing a task on the back end, going through a database or looking through a particular very specified data set for you and providing you a response based on that, is being performed more and more on graphs, because just the natural language works very well with that structure and it gives you fast responses. And you'll see this thing, I think, become more valuable as AI gets better and as our data, the data that we have as a community, as people who are in the map space, gets better. I don't know if I answered your question at all. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I'm new to LLMs and AI generally. So regarding retrieval augmented generation, I think I did something or I benefited from that function recently when I asked ChatGPT to look at all of the posts I've put on Substack and summarize the themes of my output there. Was that retrieval because it went and passed all of my Substack posts and generated a response based on what it retrieved from there? Or is that?
So this is like a great example, right? Uh, it's like a very elementary example of what RAG is. That you've given it some data, you're asking it to do stuff and do this. Now let's just scale this up, and let's say you give it all of your Substack, all the YouTube videos you've ever made, everything you've ever written in life, right? And
I'd
then
love to do that. I'd love to know what ChatGPT would say about my
ask it
entire life's
to,
output.
and maybe you ask it to write a blog the way you would write it
Yeah.
about a particular topic, and see how that performs. And then instead of now chat, like you're doing this with the general chat GPT, just the chatbot, right? But assume that you take this to the playground and you start doing it with just your data and the foundational model, and you're fine tuning it. So you're basically creating an, sounds crazy, but you're creating an AI will
Yeah,
who is going to
fascinating.
write blogs for you on the side. And he's just fine tuned for that particular operation.
Wow. Um, I'm excited about the future.
Yeah.
In summary, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So I need to understand this concept of a graph better. I remember when it made its way into the popular consciousness a few years ago with back when it used to be called Facebook, where suddenly people became aware of this social graph. And it was the idea that Facebook had somehow classified connections between everyone through basically lists of friends. So I guess I understand what that means. Through my training in geospatial, I understand network graphs in terms of streets, edges, nodes, edge weights, the cost to traverse a graph between an origin and destination. So I understand, I guess, a spatial graph. I'm struggling to make the leap to the kind of graph that you're producing. You did describe how you were able to link different things in the world through reviews, traffic, like physical traffic in terms of vehicles. I'm just, it'd help if you could explain it again,
Sure. Let me just share my screen here.
or if you have a diagram or something like that.
Yeah. So let's just say that you're the Facebook example is perfect, right? Facebook built a social graph. Fundament, it's what they did was that each user in Facebook is one of these little circles, and their relationships with other users or their relationships with other objects that those users create. So comments or posts or whatever is sort of one of these things. One of these things is called an edge. So edges are relationships and nodes are people or whatever, posts or whatever in Facebook system. And what this allows them to do is that is two things. One is typically when you're trying to perform a query, you're kind of almost doing a search, a targeted search of something, right? And then filtering that based on something else. What Facebook does when you kind of ask, when you sort of, I'm sure you've used Instagram, and when you see a pizza reel, and then they show you 17 other pizza reels right after it, that happens because they've identified that, okay, this is the person, and they linked you to a pizza, and then that pizza linked to a bunch of other reels that were related to pizza, and those kind of showed up for you. And that works very fast and very efficiently because of the structure, because you're not querying at any point, you're just running through this particular graph. You imagine a little person who is carrying all of these reels to your phone, and he's running across the graph, picking up these things and setting them. And that model has been very performative for them. The issues with the algorithm and everything are something else, and we don't want to talk about it. But just in terms of how well it performs at scale with a lot of data, Facebook's like billion users, right? And billion users posting billions of things on a daily basis is able to perform at that rate very efficiently, which is sort of merit to the way that they've kind of structured it, but also to the actual data representation itself. Now imagine that what is excellent about a spatial representation of map data, like a spatial DB or GeoDB or whatever, is that you can perform spatial queries really well, right? And you can sort of ask it questions about intersections and booleans and create a worksheet around me and do all of these fun things, and can do it really well. What it can't do is it cannot be used to generate or interpret stuff in a machine manner, right? It's still a human in the loop. The human is making the inference, and the process is being executed by the computer. Now, let's just imagine that I have the world, and I have this world structured in this particular manner, right? Where there is an office building, and there are places within it, and there are other places near it. And so I can see that, okay, I don't know what I'm doing with this. Sorry. There you go. All right.
Yep,
There's
I
a
see.
school, and the school is near this hospital, and the school is near this office building, and this hospital is near this apartment building. This apartment building is near this university, which is near this office building again. All right. And you have this structure built up. And I have assigned weights to all of these based on traffic.
Okay, and you've got the entry and exit there as well, which is vital for a large complex. Okay.
Yep. And once I have this structured out, this is not like, by the way, this is not how a graph looks like. This is just like a very abstracted way representation of it. But let's just imagine that I am in a city where I have all of this data, but I don't have enough traffic data about the city. And I don't know sort of, let's just say Nagpur, we don't have traffic data in Nagpur, but we have all of this information in Nagpur. Traffic data has a logic to itself, right? And you know that traffic during the daytime might flow from this place to this place, and this place to this place, and this place to this place. And maybe during the evening, it'll flow in the opposite direction. And based on how much of a cluster of apartments I have here, that can create a weight for the traffic that is flowing in each direction. Now, what I can do based on that is I can simulate traffic even in conditions where I don't have enough data, based on the logic of clustering and the logic of sort of how places are organized. And that allows me to generate enough synthetic data, which I can supplement and maybe train a model to make better decisions while in traffic, right? And that's just a very basic example of what this can do, because if it can do that, then maybe it can answer questions like, I have to make 20 deliveries today, and I'm going to start at 9 a.m. and I want to check out at 6 p.m. How do I make these deliveries in the best possible way? And it can make that decision for you, even in the absence of traffic data, because it's making those decisions on the fly. It's not planning a route for you. It's making those decisions on the fly as you travel. And B, it's making those decisions based on the clustering of different places across different spaces across sort of the graph.
Sure. Okay. So if it's possible, in terms of this graph, where do users fit in who you are incentivizing to map the world? What is added to this graph by them?
So these are user contributions, right? Each of these places are user contributions. The relationships are built out by us based on just spatial relationships that already exist. But I'll show you something interesting, which is what we were talking about earlier. If you can give me a second to reshare. This is the same graph that we saw in the last image, right? But imagine this is Will.
Yep.
Right? And Will works at 505 in building R in PQR office. And he visited this place, and he visited this 6011 in BKC office, and he lives in 101 ABC apartments, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know this because he's created local codes for these. It's will.home.proto is this, will.work.proto is this, and he's made visits to all of these places. And all of this information is stored with Will in a private account. So I am a business that has this graph. I'm Amazon. I have this graph, the gray graph that you see, and I want to recommend Will the best possible places that he should buy clothes from that are near him or whatever. And Will comes into on logs on, and I ask him if I can pair with his account. He says yes, and he gives me permission to access his visits, which are shopping related only.
Yeah.
And based on that list, I'm able to pair within the graph and figure out what are the best places that are adjacent, what are the best places that are relevant, and give you the response that you need. And
Okay.
that unlocks a higher level of opportunities that I feel like this is now like a developer's playground to sort of build a new level of consumer products built on top of this.
Right. Okay. So that requires me to have the Proto app always tracking where I'm going. And for Proto to classify my visits, like, because you said that I could expose the aspect of what's stored in local code that relates to shopping. So would Proto automatically make those classifications of being shopping visits based on the nature of the building that I have visited, or do I make those classifications?
Right now, we make those classifications on the app, right? But we're working on a few things. We're working on open sourcing that system itself, the protocol of how this is done, so that it's not just you having to have Proto installed. You can just create this for yourself independently without us having to be in the loop at all. So you can take your Google history, export that, and import that in, and that particular protocol does the classification for you, and it stores it. Uh, Almost like just a web page where you can dump it and it will do the work for you. And that is the ideal case for us, where everyone uses this. Is not predicated on having to be a contributor in the app or being a contributor to our community or whatever, because that widens the use case and the surface area of opportunities for developers to create.
Interesting. I'm fascinated, and I think there's a huge discussion there about privacy too. It reminds me of location-based advertising. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm aware of, like, when I used to live in Kuwait, every time I went to Avenues Mall, which is this massive 2 kilometer long shopping mall, whenever I got within, sight of that mall, suddenly my phone would get all sorts of SMSs, um, about shops in the mall, encouraging me to go and visit them. So that was more of an older sort of similar solution there. Um, and I was interested because I never signed up for any of those SMS, notifications. Um, and it made me think about the privacy laws as they existed in Kuwait, enabling that sort of advertising behavior. Um, and I suppose those laws might be different, depending on the jurisdiction you're in. Anyway, there's a lot of discussion here, and I feel like for success, there is, yes, a bunch of development issues that need solving. There's the graph and the detail of that needs solving. But there's also the safety of one's personal location information. Um,
So just in terms of privacy, like one of the things that we've learned over the past year is the best practice is just to comply with EU GDPR, because that is considered the
yeah,
gold standard for
yeah,
location data privacy. And like even though we're building mostly in India, we try to build around those guidelines. So it's
I
also
just
just
wanted
an
to say
easier
that's
thing to
fascinating to
do.
see. It's fascinating to see how the EU seems to be having an outsized influence these days. Like you're saying in India, you're building to GDPR as the standard. There's also the fact that everyone's, even iPhones now have, there's no more Lightning ports. It's USB 3, USB-C rather. It's interesting to see the influence of the EU, just as an aside. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, but it's just easy. Like also from like a workload standpoint, it's just easier to comply with the highest standards,
Yes. Yeah.
and it just makes life easier for you to do that. And then it's also better, and it's sort of there's not a big difference in sort of having to comply with this versus the Indian standard. Might as well do the better one so that you have a wider market to approach.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's a good answer. All right. So then, as the last question, if you were to hire an apprentice, what qualities would get them the job?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, we just generally, as a team, like people who are technical. Not technical in the sense technical. I don't have a technical background, but like people who can think technically. If you can solve a problem algorithmically, then that's a huge unlock. And also, I like people who are like, I personally prefer people on the team who can own a task. Like just like if you give them something to do, they can just pick up a task on their own and they can execute that till the end without having to sort of anyone needing intervention in the middle, right? So self-starters, people who are curious. Like one of the things we check for is how many side projects has a person done. Like have they, apart from what they work on, have they done other stuff? Side quests that you take in a game are very important, I feel. And
No one's actually mentioned that before. I've asked this question to so many people. That's a really nice one, I think, and a great tip for candidates looking for a job anywhere to show your initiative in terms of a portfolio. Yes, showing your general enthusiasm spilling over outside of your work. That's a great answer.
yeah, and I think that's it pretty much. We're also very like open to people who come from any sort of background. We don't have like a too much of a tight, straight-jacketed approach to this. It's a small team. Everyone does everything. So if you can do everything, then you're in.
Yep, cool. Great answer. Appreciate it, Akshay. And yeah, the overview there, including those diagrams you showed, was really nice to be able to get into the details about graphs. I feel like this is an emerging sort of theme. Spatial risk systems, when I talked with them, a sort of a spatial finance firm in Manhattan, I began to see Ken Zockoll, their CEO, mentioning spatial knowledge graphs yeah, a few months ago. So yeah, great
Yeah, I've
to
seen
have
them using
someone
it a
to
lot actually.
right.
They're one of the, they've been ahead of the curve on this.
Ah, right. There you go. All right. Cool. So glad to be tracking that theme as well on the podcast. So needless to say, it's Proto or something like that that people search for online. How do people get to you?
If you want to download the app, you can just search for Proto Mapper on iOS or Android. If you're in India, you can also download it on the Indus App Store. The same app. And if you want to search for us online, it's protomap.xyz, and everything will be available there. All the links, all the relevant stuff. The best place to follow us is Twitter because that's where we're most active. Uh, it's DP_Proto, and you can find us, and we will yeah, we put out a lot of fun stuff, just random tweets and reels and just videos and things like that. You can have some fun. And if you want to organize a mapathon, if you're in a city where we don't have coverage and you want to organize a mapathon, please reach out. We have a pizza party fund. We sort of support you with a grant. You can have a pizza party and organize the mapathon in your city.
Perfect. Love how you're growing the community. Good work, Akshay. Really proud to
Awesome.
have you on.
Thank you, Will. It was great.